The knock comes at midnight, 3 days after the worst night of my life. I almost don't answer it. I've spent 3 days convincing myself that humiliation has a bottom, that I've already hit it, that nothing left in this world could make the ache in my chest any sharper. But the knock comes again, patient and quiet, and something in the rhythm of it makes me open the door anyway. He's standing there alone. No guards, no ceremonial escort, no crown even, just him, in a plain travelling cloak, looking like he hasn't slept since the selection. I made a mistake, King Ashen says. I stare at him, 3 days of carefully rebuilt composure cracking instantly. You had one job that night, I say, my voice shaking with an anger I didn't know I was still carrying. You had to choose. And you chose everyone except me, in front of the entire kingdom. I know, he says. That's why I'm here. The selection I need to explain what happened 3 nights ago, because nothing about tonight makes sense without understanding the specific cruelty of that evening. The royal selection happens once, when an alpha king is ready to choose his mate from among the kingdom's eligible omegas. Unlike smaller provincial ceremonies, the selection is public spectacle on a massive scale. Every candidate presented formally, examined, questioned, and ultimately either chosen or dismissed in front of the assembled court and half the kingdom's nobility. I was one of 40 candidates that night. 40 women who'd spent months preparing, each hoping that some quality we possessed, beauty, wit, lineage, the particular chemistry that supposedly marks a true mate bond, would be enough to secure a future none of us fully understood, but all of us had been raised to want. I made it to the final round. Just me and 2 other candidates, standing before King Ashen while the entire court watched, waiting for his decision. He chose neither of the other 2. He chose me. I remember the moment with painful clarity, his hand extended toward me. The crowd already shifting toward celebration, my own heart hammering with something between terror and disbelief. And then, just as his fingers were about to close around mine, he stopped. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face, and then he withdrew his hand. I apologize, he said, loud enough for the entire court to hear. I've made an error in judgment. This isn't the right choice. And then, in front of everyone, my family, the other candidates, half the kingdom's assembled nobility, he walked away from me and selected no one at all, declaring the selection concluded without a chosen mate, leaving me standing alone on the dais while 300 people watched my humiliation unfold in real time. I don't remember the walk home. I remember crying so hard I could barely see the road, my mother trying to offer comfort that felt hollow against the specific public nature of what had just happened. I remember thinking that I would never fully recover from being chosen, and then, in the same breath, unchosen in front of everyone I'd ever know. I told myself I was done. Done with selections, done with alphas, done with the particular cruelty of a system that reduces women to spectacle and then discards them without explanation. 3 days later, he's standing at my door. The explanation you have exactly as long as it takes me to close this door to explain yourself. I tell him, my hand still on the doorframe, not fully committing to letting him inside. That's fair, he says. More than fair, actually, given what I did. So explain. He's quiet for a moment, and I notice, despite my anger, how genuinely exhausted he looks. Not performing exhaustion for sympathy, actually depleted, the way someone looks after days without proper sleep. When I reached for your hand, he says, I felt something. A pull, immediate and overwhelming, the kind of recognition every story describes, but that I'd never actually experienced, despite meeting hundreds of candidates over the years. And it terrified me. That's not an explanation. That's an excuse. Let me finish, he says. And there's something raw in his voice that makes me pause. I panicked, not because of you specifically, but because of what that recognition meant. My father chose my mother through exactly that kind of overwhelming pull, and it destroyed both of them. He became obsessive, controlling, convinced that the intensity of the bond gave him ownership over her entire existence. She spent 20 years slowly disappearing into what he needed her to be, until there was nothing left of who she'd actually been before him. I hadn't expected this. I'd expected excuses about political considerations, about advisors' concerns, about anything except this specific painful vulnerability. So you rejected me because you were afraid of becoming your father, I say slowly. Yes, he admits. In the moment, standing there feeling that pull toward you, all I could think about was watching my mother disappear for 2 decades. And I panicked. I made a choice based on fear instead of thought, and I hurt you catastrophically in the process, and I've spent 3 days understanding exactly how wrong that choice was. The anger, do you understand what you did to me? I ask, and the anger I've been holding for 3 days finally breaks free. You didn't just reject me privately, you did it in front of the entire kingdom. My family was there. Every candidate who lost to me in the earlier rounds was there, watching me get chosen and then discarded in the same breath. I can't walk through the market without people whispering about it. My own cousins have started avoiding me because being associated with public humiliation is apparently contagious. I know, he says. I've heard the same whispers. I've watched the same avoidance happening around my own court, actually, because half my advisors think I've lost my mind, and the other half think I've finally shown proper caution about mate bonds. So which is it? Did you lose your mind, or did you show proper caution? Neither, he says. I made a mistake born from fear, and I've spent 3 days trying to figure out how to fix something that felt unfixable. Because I can't undo the humiliation. I can't take back what happened in that court, or the whispers, or the damage to your reputation. All I can do is tell you the truth now. Even though the truth doesn't erase what my fear cost you. What is the truth? I ask, though part of me is terrified of the answer. That I've thought about you every hour since that night, he says. Not with regret about the recognition I felt, regret about how I responded to it. I keep replaying the moment, imagining what would have happened if I'd simply chosen you instead of running from what that choice meant. I've built an entire future in my head, over 3 sleepless nights, of what might have been possible if fear hadn't made the decision for me. The vulnerability you can't just show up at midnight and expect 3 days of humiliation to disappear because you've had a change of heart, I say, though my voice has lost some of its earlier fire. I'm not expecting that, he says. I'm not expecting anything, actually. I came here without guards, without ceremony, without any of the trappings that usually accompany royal decisions. Specifically because I wanted you to understand this isn't political calculation. This is me, alone, admitting I was wrong, with no way to protect my own dignity if you decide to close this door and never speak to me again. That's a significant risk for a king to take. It's nothing compared to the risk you took, he says. Standing on that dais, hoping to be chosen, knowing that if you were, your entire life would change irrevocably. You risked everything that night, and I responded to your courage with cowardice. The least I can do now is match that risk with my own vulnerability. I study him for a long moment, this man who publicly humiliated me 3 days ago, now standing at my door in the middle of the night, offering an explanation that's more honest than anything I expected from someone with his power and status. What do you actually want? I ask. Say it plainly. Not political language. Not diplomatic softening. What are you asking for? A second chance, he says. Not to redo the selection. That ceremony is finished, and I understand if you never want to participate in anything resembling it again. Just a chance to know you properly. Real conversation. Real time. Without the pressure of public spectacle or immediate decision. I want to prove that what I felt reaching for your hand wasn't a mistake. The mistake was how I responded to it. The hesitation I need you to understand something, I tell him, finally stepping back from the doorway, though I haven't yet invited him inside. Even if I believe everything you're telling me, even if this is genuine and not some elaborate political recovery strategy, you still humiliated me in front of everyone I know. That doesn't disappear, because you've explained your reasoning. I know, he says. I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking you to let me try to earn something different going forward, understanding that the damage already done stays done. I can't undo 3 days of public humiliation. I can only try to build something honest enough that eventually the humiliation becomes a difficult memory instead of the entire story. That's going to take time. I have time, he says. I have nothing but time, actually, since I declared the selection concluded without a chosen mate. My advisors are furious. The kingdom's succession planning is in chaos. I've created exactly the kind of political mess my father would have avoided through decisive action, and I did it because some part of me understood, even in the moment of panic, that choosing anyone except you would have been the greater mistake. I let this sink in. The reality that his rejection wasn't just of me specifically, but of the entire process, of every other candidate, of the whole spectacle that brought us to that dais in the first place. You ended the selection entirely, I say slowly. Not just my chance, everyone's. Because the recognition I felt wasn't something I could simply transfer to someone else, he says. If I couldn't have you, choosing anyone else would have been its own kind of lie, performing a bond I didn't actually feel, for the sake of political convenience. I'd rather face a succession crisis than build my entire reign on that kind of dishonesty. The decision I'm not saying yes to anything tonight, I tell him. And I watch something like acceptance, not disappointment, cross his face. I need time to think about whether I can trust this, whether the risk of being humiliated again is worth whatever you're actually offering. That's fair, he says. More than fair. But I'm not closing the door either, I continue, surprising myself with the admission. Not because I've forgiven what happened 3 days ago. Because you came here alone, at midnight, with nothing protecting your dignity if I'd simply turned you away. That took more courage than choosing me on that dais would have taken, honestly, and I think that courage deserves at least the chance for me to consider what you're actually offering. Thank you, he says, and the relief in his voice is genuine. Unguarded in a way that surprises me from someone with his power and status. Don't thank me yet, I say. This isn't forgiveness. This is the possibility of eventually getting there. If you can prove that tonight wasn't just panic responding to panic. I understand, he says. I'll take that possibility. It's more than I deserved when I knocked on this door. The weeks after what follows isn't the fairy tale reconciliation the kingdom's gossips probably expect. Given how thoroughly the story of the selection's dramatic collapse has spread through every province by now. It's slower than that. More careful. He visits without ceremony, usually in the evenings, and our conversations start hesitant and formal before gradually becoming something more honest. I learn about his father's 20-year destruction of his mother's identity, about the specific terror that recognition triggered in him, because he'd spent his entire childhood watching what an overwhelming bond could do to someone who never learned to resist it. He learns about my own family, my father's death when I was 12, the specific vulnerability of growing up as the eldest daughter in a family without enough resources, the particular desperation that made the selection feel less like opportunity and more like obligation. Would you have chosen this? he asks me, several weeks into our careful reacquaintance, during one of our evening conversations in my family's modest garden. The selection, I mean. If your circumstances had been different, if there hadn't been financial pressure pushing you toward participating, I consider this honestly. I don't know. Probably not. I think I would have preferred choosing someone slowly, the way we're doing now, instead of a spectacle designed to produce instant decisions about someone's entire future. I've been thinking about that too, he says, about whether the entire selection tradition needs to change, whether reducing this kind of decision to a single public ceremony ever actually served anyone well, or whether it just performed decisiveness while ignoring the actual complexity of choosing a life partner. Is that something you can change? As king, I can try, he says. I've already started drafting reforms with my council, longer courtship periods, private introductions instead of public spectacle, the option for candidates to withdraw without public humiliation if they change their minds partway through. Nothing that erases what happened to you, but something that might prevent it happening to anyone else. The trust rebuilds slowly, the way it should after genuine damage, and I find myself grateful that he never pushes for it to move faster than feels honest. There are difficult conversations, moments where my anger resurfaces unexpectedly, triggered by an overheard comment about the selection, by a family member's careful avoidance of the topic, by my own memory suddenly replaying the specific horror of standing alone on that dais while the whole court watched. He never dismisses this anger or asks me to move past it faster than I'm ready to. He simply stays present through it, absorbing the difficult conversations without defensiveness, understanding that rebuilding trust means accepting that the damage doesn't disappear just because his intentions have changed. I keep waiting for you to get tired of my anger, I tell him, 4 months into our careful courtship, during an evening where a particularly painful memory of the selection resurfaced unexpectedly. I won't, he says simply, because I earned it. Every time it resurfaces, I'm reminded of exactly what my fear cost you, and that reminder keeps me honest about how much better I need to be going forward. That's not a very romantic sentiment, I point out, though something in his steadiness makes me smile despite myself. Romance isn't the goal right now, he says. Trust is. Romance can come after, once you actually believe I'm not going to panic and disappear again the moment things become genuinely serious. The proposal he asks me to be his mate almost a year after the disastrous selection, in a moment nothing like the public spectacle that started this entire story. There's no court watching, no ceremonial dice, no audience waiting to judge whether his choice meets their expectations. Just the two of us. In the garden where we've spent countless evenings slowly rebuilding what his panic destroyed, with nothing but genuine conversation between us. I'm not going to reach for your hand and then pull away this time, he says, though he makes no move to actually touch me, understanding, after a year of careful rebuilding, that the choice needs to be entirely mine to make. I'm asking plainly, without spectacle or public pressure, will you be my mate? Not because recognition demands it, because I've spent a year actually knowing you, and everything I've learned has only confirmed what I felt reaching for your hand that night, before fear made a different choice for me. I think about the girl who cried the entire walk home from that humiliating selection, who told herself she was done with alphas and ceremonies, and the particular cruelty of public spectacle. I think about the year since, the careful rebuilding, the honest conversations, the way trust actually gets earned instead of assumed. Yes, I tell him. Not because you're king, not because the recognition demands it, but because I've spent this year actually knowing you too. And I trust what we've built enough to choose it deliberately. Epilogue. The new tradition 2 years after the selection that started this story with such public humiliation King Ashen's reforms to the royal courtship tradition have taken full effect. There's no more public spectacle demanding instant decisions in front of assembled courts. Instead, candidates are introduced privately, given real time to determine compatibility before any public announcement occurs, and given the explicit right to withdraw without shame if the connection doesn't develop as expected. I helped design much of this reform, actually, drawing on my own experience of exactly what public humiliation cost someone who trusted a broken system to treat her fairly. It feels strange, sometimes, that the worst night of my life became the catalyst for changing an entire kingdom's approach to how alphas choose their mates. Do you ever regret it? I ask Ashen sometimes. The panic, the public rejection, everything that happened that night. I regret the pain it caused you, he always says. I'll never stop regretting that specific damage. But I don't regret where it led us. Because I don't think we would have built something this honest if we'd started with the immediate, unexamined recognition instead of working through genuine fear first. I think he's right, though the path here cost more than either of us should have had to pay. Sometimes healing looks like a knock at midnight, someone standing alone with no protection for their dignity, admitting they were wrong. Sometimes trust gets rebuilt one honest conversation at a time, slowly enough that it actually holds when tested. And sometimes the worst night of your life becomes, eventually, simply the beginning of a much longer, much better story. One built not on instant recognition, but on the harder, more valuable work of choosing each other, deliberately, again and again, until the choosing itself becomes the thing worth trusting.